in the stream here, but like I said, hit an 8-hour mark, so we're back up. Share the stream out again, guys. Let's get back in here.
Theoretically, that we think that the 12 of you think that it is reasonable to have used force, deadly force in that situation. Shoots once, takes out his hip. What does Mr. Rittenhouse have to do to avoid that? Well, maybe take one step back. And Mr. Rosenbaum is no threat. And Mr. Rittenhouse is responsible for every round of that gun. It did not have to happen as fast as Mr. Rittenhouse made it happen. He could have held back at one shot. He could have held back at two shots. The guy in the blue hoodie who came in to attempt to kick him didn't get 4 shots. Mr. Rosenbaum didn't get 4 shots. And Mr. Gross-Kreutz did not get 4 shots. The defendant has the ability to gauge what he is doing and to stop shooting. Mr. Richards talks about the threat being immobilized. What threat does someone 6 inches shorter than you that you've already shot in the hip and is already falling to the ground have? Why do you have to keep tracking them and shooting them and ending up with a kill shot in the back? Hit them, kick them, knee them, anything else. And Mr. Rosenbaum and Mr. Rittenhouse are alive. Because the defense talks about games that the prosecution has played. Let's talk about games. Let's talk about how Mr. Rittenhouse on that night did not tell Dominic Black, did not tell Joanne Fiedler, did not tell anyone about this grabbing of the gun. Didn't tell anyone about, oh, I was afraid they were use the gun against me. That is because once Mr. Rittenhouse and his team understood that an unarmed person chasing him.
We're going to show a different link here. So
the question.
There we go. Sorry, this is the one we're with. We're good. All the way good.
And it has been either it's been a mutual request to adjourn the case. Who's his lawyer?
Mr. Barth.
Okay, it's been repeatedly requested that it be adjourned, and I assumed or was told, I'm not sure which, it would be adjourned pending the outcome of this case. No, that's not true?
No. I don't know.
Well, it's not true. It is true that I assumed it. Whether I was told that or not, I don't know.
It's not the same as Dominic Black, Your Honor. It's a different situation. Mr. Ziminski's case will go to trial on January 31st.
Well,
that's the plan. But
why was it being adjourned?
I think there was some. We had a witness who was not available at the last trial date, so we needed more time to get them in.
Okay. And Mr. Richards also brings up a point that you have control over the availability of a witness in terms of grant of immunity, but I don't want to get into that because I think on the first point he made, which is that I don't think it's an evidence.
I asked Mr. DeBruin about it.
What did you ask Mr. DeBruin?
I asked Mr. DeBruin that when we were talking about our meeting, that he was going to be a witness against Mr. Ziminski, and that Mr. Binger talked to him mostly about Mr. Ziminski because there's a pending case against Mr. Ziminski.
Say again.
After Mr. DeBruin talked about our meeting on cross-examination, I asked Mr. DeBruin, I believe this was a while ago, I indicated that he was going to be a witness in the Ziminski case, and that Mr. Binger asked him mostly about Ziminski, and why would Mr. Binger ask questions about Mr. Ziminski in an effort to change his statement in the Rittenhouse case? And he had no answer for that.
What's that got to do with the
If remember right,
the district attorney is making, or the defense attorney is making?
It's that there's an open pending case against him.
there was specific testimony that there was a trial date on January 31st. That came in through Mr. DeBruin, and I actually mentioned it in my closing. because it's in evidence that there's a pending case. I'm prosecuting Mr. Zeminski, and the trial's coming up in January. That is in evidence, Your Honor.
That has nothing to do with the amendment, which is what I'm objecting to, and bringing that into this.
I don't know. You're making it sound as if, well, you're making it sound, and correctly so, that Mr. Zeminski is unavailable because of his testimonial privilege. But now Mr. Richards is asking whether he should be allowed a rebuttal to, so the jury would understand that that is somewhat under the control of the district attorney. But I'm not going to, at this point, I'm not going to get further into that. I'm just going to ask you to move on to something else.
Well, my next line of argument is that the defense named them in their witness list and could have called the Zeminskis.
No, he can't, because he's got a Fifth Amendment privilege for the very reason you indicate. And privileges must be claimed as much as possible outside the presence of the jury. That's the statute.
They could have called Kelly Zeminski. They written her here from prison.
Pardon me?
Did he say from prison?
Have her available in case something came up. That doesn't mean we have to call her. We have no obligation to put anybody on the witness stand.
Nor does the state. And
The state has,
Mr. Richards commented many times about how we could have called them, which I think was dishonest given the Fifth Amendment issue. But then also I can mention that when he stood up and read his witness lists, the Zeminskis were on it, and they have the ability to call them as well.
the witness list is not in evidence.
These are opening statements, and he commented on those multiple times.
I
I feel like the judges froze for some reason, which is all right, we're gonna do this. The judges, for whatever reason, he's frozen. Oh, I guess he's not there anymore. He's
what was the last statement you made now that drew the objection?
That Mr. Zeminski has an open case and a Fifth Amendment right.
Yeah. Well, it is an accurate statement.
That I should be able to fill in the holes because they're the ones who can give them immunity. I can't call them.
Well, I know that, but
Why'd you subpoena him?
you know. You can
He was
address-
saying in the hallway for 2 days.
No. You address your remarks to me, both of you. To me,
right.
Not to each other, please.
It's called being prepared. I don't know what's going to happen at a trial.
Okay.
He said you directed comments at me. Look at even Kyle over there in the corner. He was just kind of like, damn. I'll chill out. It is on YouTube. We're watching YouTube. CJTV. Feel free to pop over to CJTV Media over on YouTube, and you can watch there or right here on Facebook.
That Mrs. Zeminski would have been available for to be called by either party. Okay.
Fine.
Oh man, I got out of it alive. Okay.
He makes a lot of jokes about mortality. If you haven't caught that, guys, it's like, oh well, it's not like I killed somebody or that one. Oh, I got out of that one alive. I'm like, yeah, he's old school, man. This judge, You guys just got hit with the lip balm. Boom. Like a lot of that burns. Ooh. That burp bees hits. It's that peppermint. Toby, I'm not sure. It looks pretty good on my end. Share the feed out, guys. We're moving into rebuttals right now. Just to be clear, what we have going right now is so prosecution gave their final arguments. Defense gave their final arguments. Now I believe that each one of them has a half hour, correct me if I'm wrong, as a rebuttal to the final argument. So because I think defense ended, prosecution will then go, and then I'm not sure if then
All right, folks,
defense gets a chance to rebuttal.
The situation is that Mrs.
How that's gonna work.
Zeminski would have been available to either party to call as a witness, and neither of them has done so. Okay, any question? Go ahead, Mr. Krause.
Thank you. Mr. Richards also mentioned that Attorney Binger talked about how all these people are liars, and he was acting like a whiny defense attorney. I don't know why that language had to be used, but Mr. Binger never said any such thing. He never called anyone a liar, except for perhaps Mr. Rittenhouse. And Mr. Richards talks about how, well, in the state's opening, you heard nothing about provocation. Mr. Richards knows that is a specific thing, that instruction we get from the judge at the end of the trial. Had we mentioned at the beginning, he would have objected. He would have objected.
Doesn't one and only mean like one?
Now let's talk
and
about
only?
this threat, this supposed threat. Mr. Richards talked about that gas station and showed the video, and it showed Mr. Rosenbaum at the end. Attorney Binger had said he's not in this video as it started, and you don't hear anything from him. And that is true. At the very end, he is seen standing quite a bit away from Mr. Balch and Mr. Rittenhouse. This is where that supposed threat happened. There's a distance between them. Next time the camera pans back, the protesters are pushed back, and you never hear this threat. You hear nothing. And apparently that is what the defense is accepting, is where the threat happened. Although Mr. Rittenhouse actually does not accept that, because he said it happened at Blocker 2 North. So they can't agree on when the threat took place.
This is the second
They can't agree
final.
on where the threat took place. And it's the only few seconds of that part of the night that is not on tape anywhere. It's another concoction to give credence or to give weight that, oh, he had to defend himself against an unarmed man.
I live in this world. Christina, thank you for saying that. Christina,
Just
Michelle
talk
Stewart
about how
Walker.
the defendant came around that Duramax and raised his gun. That didn't seem to be a contested issue in the case until the defendant lied about it on the stand. The defense themselves submitted an exhibit, number 41, in which it is denoted where the person that put that video together indicates Rittenhouse pointing gun at Zeminski's. I think it has a question mark. This
I'd
was
watch
their
that.
exhibit.
I'd watch that show in a heartbeat.
There was testimony from Detective Antaramian, and we showed this drone video. Now, but then the defendant won't admit to it on the stand, and then all of a sudden the defense has to fight it and talk about hocus pocus and make up little clever rhymes. The defendant could have told you the truth,
That was funny.
but that hurts his case, and that gives us provocation. Now, I did have on rebuttal, Mr. Armstrong put in two very blurry pictures. Mr. Binger didn't even mention these pictures in his closing because they're maybe the fifth, sixth, or seventh strongest pieces of evidence that Mr. Rittenhouse raised his gun. But the defense is seizing on them. And they inaccurately said that it took him 20 hours of work to do. He worked on that drone video for 20 hours. He made us multiple shorter videos of it. These images were the last part of that work. And that image does show Mr. Rittenhouse holding a gun. It is blurry. Does it show every detail? No. But we thought it important that there at least be some still shot besides these videos. The second one I showed, again, is very blurry, but it's of the shooting. And you see Mr. Rittenhouse blurry, you see the puff of smoke, and you see Mr. Rosenbaum blurry, still very much upright. And that is why those pictures are given. It was the tail end of all the work that Mr. Armstrong did on this video The defense seems very scared of these pictures because it helps to prove their client lied on the stand, and it shows that he provoked the attack. Now, I would like to show you, I believe this is the full drone video, Exhibit 73.
Well, what happened to final arguments being final arguments, man? I mean, really? You guys, and I appreciate all of you that have been riding all day. I mean, we're creeping up on 8.5 hours in the chair of the back and forth. And we're going back to this drone footage again. The magical drone that came out of nowhere.
So in this one, it is difficult to see the raising of the gun because it's the full video. I would encourage you, if you find it necessary, to take a closer look at the bigger TV. Please stop it. Now, if you see in this video, Mr. Richards wants to make it seem like the only recourse the defendant has in retreating is walking into this mob of people who are breaking cars. But look at all that open space that he has. At this moment, he could have turned around and ran in that space and gone right back up Sheridan, and everyone would be alive and everyone would be fine. Instead, he decides to start slowing down and run into these cars in which he is supposedly trapped, which would be like being trapped in a Target parking lot. As you see, as we keep playing it, he goes around them no problem, and he goes right into this totally clear space that was available to him the whole time. He did not exhaust his duty to retreat. He did not exhaust all of his options. Now, I'm going to go to the video. I'm going to point something out. Mr. Binger is going to play it again, and I'll show you. This is in relation to Mr. Richards indicated that no one that attacked or that went after Mr. Rittenhouse in the second incident observed the shooting. That is not true. This video shows the person that is referred to as Jump Kick Man leaving the scene. And we have another view as well from another video, but I'll point that out. See this man in a wheelchair? He's struggling to get out of the way. This is Jump Kick Man is right here. He sees it. He's standing there the whole time, and he comes and he helps push the man in the wheelchair out of the scene. So he absolutely was there. He did see what happened. What's next? This is Exhibit 10. This is the Ford Fisher video. If you look after the shooting, it shows this individual pushing the wheelchair away from car source 3. There he is across the street, pushing the man in the wheelchair away out of the scene.
Yeah, I had you guys on mute. Sorry, we're coordinating right now. So apparently he does not work a mic either. So yeah, you know. Hello. Is it me you're looking for?
This is a video you've seen before. It does look better on
said,
the
"Give me that
large
mic."
television, but this is where he comes into the screen. This is one of the videos that Mr. Armstrong cropped for us in his 20 hours of work. This is slowed down by 50%. and it zooms in as good as possible given the limitations of the video. I'll point it out up here, but I said it is better seen on the large TV. There he is pointing the gun. He's not close enough to the car to have that be a factor. He puts on the fire extinguisher, he freezes up. It is.
Did you guys just hear the court reporters like, just like even she's getting tired of it. I bet.
Again, that really wasn't an issue at trial until the defendant lied about it. Now, Exhibit 84, this is another video that Mr. Armstrong did in his 20 hours of work.
Why do they keep saying the 20 hours of work? We
shows
think, yeah,
the-
well done.
Part of the chase, that's where you see him point. Mr. Rosenbaum does his jump. See the defendant slowing down, seemingly preparing to shoot. And look where that first shot is.
Oh, sorry, man.
Go back play it one more time. This is the zoomed in image that will eventually was shown. Look how far he's not reaching. He's being shot in the hip and falling. And he goes immediately to the ground, and the defendant sees fit, just keep shooting at him, although he poses absolutely no threat. Again, 4 feet from the barrel of the gun, not from Mr. Rittenhouse himself. Here is another video Mr. Armstrong made in his 20 hours of work. I believe he made 6 of them all told. They're all on evidence. Here's a close-up of the final shooting. The puff of smoke is already out. He's already upright. He crumples immediately to the ground, but the defendant keeps shooting him. So did Mr. Rosenbaum turn and get shot in the back that way? No, he was even less of a threat. He was falling face first on the ground with his hips shattered. So yes, he was shot in the back, and he was killed by a shot in the back. And it was the 3rd or 4th shot. Attorney Richards indicated that Nick Smith called the defendant. Nick Smith did not testify to that. He was never asked. We don't know who or who called the defendant to go to that scene. And despite the fact that there's this madman out there who's such a threat and who's going to kill the defendant, he just saunters down there all by himself. No problem. He's not scared. This threat, if it even existed, was not taken seriously. He's a babbling idiot, as Mr. Lukowski said.
I'm just going to say,
Mr.
I'm not taking
Rittenhouse testified
Lukowski
he
for
didn't
his
hear
word because
anything before he shot. He didn't hear this "fuck you." He didn't factor in the gunshot.
This guy's really breathing heavy, man.
There is no evidence that Mr. Huber
right.
did anything untowards that evening.
Just lean back.
They talked about pushing a dumpster, picking up pepper balls. That was not evidence that was ever submitted in this trial. I don't know where it comes from.
Yes,
No
prosecution
evidence that he
has
told
asked for a
Grosskreutz, "I had to
mistrial
shoot
already
in
a
self-defense."
couple days ago. Yeah, so
And Attorney Richards talks about how, well, Mr. Detective Howard testified in a certain way and how he didn't talk about the drone footage or anything. He knows we got the drone footage, surprisingly, after Detective Howard testified. Guns do not have handed. There's not a left-handed or right-handed gun. So, yes, the demonstration that Mr. Binger
was not
did
me.
is how it happened. The defendant was facing that way. He picked it up, and the videos show it. Detective Antaramian reviewed it and saw it and testified to it, and it wasn't an issue until the defendant lied. Videos don't lie, but we know Kyle Rittenhouse does. He lied all that night. A lot has been made about how Gage Grosskreutz had an attorney. How hypocritical from a lawyer to hear someone criticize someone else hiring counsel. Mr. Rittenhouse isn't here alone. He has lawyers. And I apologize that the district attorney's office followed our interpretation of Marcy's Law, which is a fairly recent, especially at that time, constitutional amendment.
I think the issue is also that when Nate DeBrune had to hire a lawyer
Gage
because he
Grosskreutz is
felt
not on
that he
trial.
was being coerced into
He
changing
followed the
his
advice of
statement
counsel not to turn
by
over
the
his phone,
DA's office.
just as anyone who hires counsel can do. They can follow the advice of their counsel.
Fair play.
We got his whole video from that night. The defense has seen it. We have it. What else do we need? Text messages from 3 weeks before? They just want to try to dig up dirt because they think it's there, because the defense wants you to believe that these people got what was coming to them, that they were bad people doing bad things, and we should be proud and boastful of Mr. Rittenhouse for killing them. Gage Grosskreutz testified what he heard, that he heard, I didn't shoot anyone, and Gage Grosskreutz acted on that. He then followed, he left Mr. Rittenhouse thinking that he was not involved in the shooting and started going to the shooting of Mr. Rosenbaum before being told by others that saw it that he was the shooter, and then he returned. So Gage Grosskreutz relied on this statement of Mr. Rittenhouse. Let's talk about a rush to judgment. Mr. Rittenhouse turned himself in. Are you supposed to wait days, weeks, months to charge murderers who we know murdered people? It's a red herring, as Mr. Binger said. It's throwing up red herrings, false hypocritical arguments, and attacks on those that Mr. Rittenhouse killed to try and distract you from the fact that he was not in imminent fear of death or great bodily harm, and he was not privileged to act how he did. We heard from Ms. Carrie Ann Swart. Now that Nathan DeBrune talked about jail, now we can try to smear Mr. Rosenbaum more, although there really is no dispute, or was no dispute, that he came from a hospital. He's carrying a hospital bag. Ms. Swart testified that she talked to the hospital about how he would be released, that he went to this hospital. She knew he was coming home from the hospital. She knew it was in the bag, and he showed that picture of it backlit against the fire, trying to make it seem sinister. She talked about how there are medical papers in there. And we did that image again. Mr. Armstrong did this image for us, where you can get a little peek in the bag. And I would argue you can see medical papers. Though that big image they see looks like rolled up medical records that you get when you're discharged from a hospital. And Ms. Swart testified that he was given medications that day. Perhaps they didn't work. Perhaps there was a bad reaction. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But he was given that day. He could not get the ones for future days because things were closed. Balch did not testify that he thought there was anything sinister in the bag. He said he said something inaccurate at the time, but he said that he saw shampoo bottles and a water bottle. Mr. DeBrune.
He's really chipping through those.
He did take some nice photographs, and he clearly wanted the world to know that he took some nice photographs. He's really more relevant to Mr. Zeminski. And he apparently, this is the photo of the bag. You can examine that further. Mr. DeBrune must have some problem with police and DA's offices. He goes to the detectives. He doesn't give a full story. He says, he testified to this. This is not me saying anything. He forgot things because he was so nervous because the door to the police station still had an unrepaired window. That caused him such nervousness that he could not give a full statement. He meets with us in a very polite, short meeting. He has very little relevance to this case that we knew about. And yes, we showed him some videos. Is this Josh Zeminski? Oh, no, it's not. Okay, would you see him in these other pictures? Yes. You don't know it's Josh Zeminski? Okay. Somehow that's us getting him to change his statement. What's that?
He's
We
heated.
show him pictures.
She derailed
videos,
his
say,
moment.
is that Josh
Look,
Sheminsky? I don't know. We show him other pictures. Do you recognize that as the same person? Yes. That's not getting him to change his statement. We had him read a statement. Do you have anything to add to it? No. The next day, he goes over to Mr. Richards' office. All of a sudden, he knows all this extra information that wasn't in his statement. Oh, but he was so nervous meeting with us because we showed him a video or photograph that he took of Joshua Ziminski. And then what does he do? He goes and hires a lawyer very closely connected with a gossip blogger who attacks my office on a regular basis and who is very pro Rittenhouse. Another just funny coincidence in this case, just like how Mr. Hernandez, who doesn't live in this state, could hire any of the thousands of attorneys in Wisconsin or tens of thousands of attorneys in the state. But no, he hires an attorney who Kyle Rittenhouse's defense team has already paid money to that firm. What a coincidence. So Mr. DeBruin doesn't tell us any information, then tries to attack us, and then tells the defense a lot more information. Mr. Rittenhouse denied pointing a gun at the yellow pants man, said he was being sarcastic. Well, Mr. Richards basically just admitted he did point the gun. So which is it? Was going around that night trying to be a paramedic, a policeman, and a fireman without receiving any real training in any of them. Tough job to do all three at once. And he went around with his gun trying to scare people, to intimidate them, to not do minor property damage. He's a chaos tourist. He was there to see what was going on, act important, be a big deal. And then the moment a little bit of that chaos comes back at him, he cowardly shoots a man instead of fighting back. You put yourself in this situation,
thought that might work.
You know it's going to be out of hand. It gets a little out of hand. Someone is chasing me, and you have to shoot him. That is not privileged. That is not reasonable. And that is not what any reasonable person in the defendant's shoes would have done.
That's the your time's up, man. It's time to move on.
About this rock in his hand. There's no evidence of there being a rock in that hand. Now, there's talk about how the defendant maybe have re-racked his gun. We don't see that in the video. We don't know what he did. But we do know that as Gage Grosskreutz is sitting there with his hands up, the defendant turns over his gun and is looking at it and is doing something with it.
No, that was me.
The defendant admitted to this, that he looked at the gun. Fully reasonable that Mr. Grosskreutz could have assumed that he was re-racking and preparing to fire. And it does not mean that a unspent shell casing has to be on the ground. Officer Bray testified that she shot AR-15s. She knows AR-15s. There's if it jams and there's an unspent shell casing, the re-racking will take out the unspent shell casing. It does not have to be a live round. I don't know what he was doing with his gun.
Wouldn't that be accounted for then on the ground with the rounds that were there?
And then what does he do? He doesn't step back and take a firing position and shoot. He didn't shoot him 5 to 6 seconds earlier when Mr. Rittenhouse was being an active shooter after having killed his second person and shot at his third. He would have every right to have stopped Mr. Rittenhouse's activities at that point. But he didn't. He came up closer. He surrendered, and he said, he believed his surrender was not being accepted. Who shoots someone like this? Is he trying to shoot his own hand off? He never does anything about an actual position to shoot that gun. And as Mr. Richards admitted in his closing, when it's pointed at his head, his arm is already blown off. We're supposed to be so scared of Mr. Grosskreutz with his Glock when the defendant is holding a loaded AR-15. Then there's this preposterous argument that, oh, Kelly Zeminski is holding a flashlight. It must be to bash heads. Certainly no one carries flashlights at night to walk home in the dark or walk to your car in the dark. I take it when I take my dog for a walk. I'm looking to bash in heads? No.
Sorry, at this point, it's just final statements should have been final statements. Can we let the jury do their job, man? Like all this muddling things up. And this is what I'm getting frustrated about. This could be the defense, and I'd have the same feeling if it was.
We
just,
hear about how
we're now
this vicious
40
kick
minutes into
that
this rebuttal.
if you watch
to
it live,
a
did not
final
seem
argument.
to make much contact. Spun him 180 degrees. That is Kyle tracking him with the gun and shooting at him. He's moving as he's moving. That is not the force of the kick. And the video makes that clear. But again, we're grasping at straws and we're throwing out red herrings. And now a skateboard is a deadly weapon. Someone should tell all the parents and grandparents and Santa Claus giving skateboards this Christmas about how they're giving their children a deadly weapon. I guess they should get them an AR-15 instead. It's just preposterous. And yes, Mr. Huber was acting heroic in holding down that and taking that skateboard and trying to hold him down and trying to take that gun. And what happened? The gun stayed attached to Mr. Rittenhouse. Because when the defense concocted this, they were trying to take my gun story, they left out that it is literally strapped to him. He shot an unarmed man 4 times because he was so scared that Mr. Rosenbaum was going to take the gun away from him when it was attached to him. It is an absolute red herring. It is an absolute ridiculous argument. Imminent threat. Not, oh, in 5 minutes after we get beat up, then I might be the threat. Imminent threat. You've heard all the videos. I'm not going to go into it any more great length, but when you listen to the crowd as Mr. Rittenhouse is running, they start yelling after as he's running when they're screaming, get him. Also, as people are approaching him at the end, they're asking, why did you shoot him? Why did you shoot him? These are people that were provoked because they witnessed an attack or heard shots or heard he was attacking, and they took action. As Mr. Bringer said, I probably wouldn't do it either. But that they did it is brave, and they did not deserve to be killed. Kyle Rittenhouse has a strong ties to Kenosha, but he needs Google Maps to find a business he says he's driven by every day. He supposedly knows Kenosha so well and is such a familiar with Kenosha that he doesn't realize you can walk 1 block either way to get back to the car source. He didn't want to go back to the car source. He wanted to go see what was going on. He wanted to stay in the action. He wanted to continue to do things that would make him feel big and make him feel important.
This is what he testified to. He said it was because of the roadblocks. He wanted to know what
These
roads were
minor
shutting down.
injuries we've heard the defendant have.
Just his testimony. That's what he said.
Again, Mr. Richards misstated the standard. It is not could have caused great bodily harm or death. It is not likely to have caused great bodily harm or death. It is imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. Where is that when you get a couple scrapes? Everybody takes a beating sometimes, right? Sometimes you get in a scuffle and maybe you do get hurt a little bit. That doesn't mean you get to start plugging people with your full metal jacket AR-15 rounds, and no, bullets are not bullets. And we heard testimony about that. Mr. Richards mentioned this in opening, but apparently he's noticed that the evidence doesn't bear it out. He talks about this, how Mr. Rosenbaum put this shirt over his head to hide his identity because he's going to go ambush Kyle Rittenhouse. Well, then obviously watch the videos. He's had that shirt on his head for some time. Whether it's COVID, this is all pre-vaccine, as we know. Whether it's tear gas, whether it's fire, whatever it is, He's using it to protect his face, not as some evil plan to get Kyle Rittenhouse.
Or to obstruct his face.
They're setting this fire and they begin walking down Sheridan. There's no evidence that they knew he was coming. There's no evidence that they had any plan to get him. I'd submit to you that the Zeminskis and Mr. Rosenbaum were doing what they were doing all night. They were going to go bash that Duramax or start or stoke a fire. Kyle sees this and then he runs onto the scene. That's clear in the FBI video. He runs onto the scene. He puts down the fire extinguisher. He raises up his gun. Mr. Rosenbaum yells, "Gun, gun, gun." Why else would he yell that? It's very possible that while he was yelling friendly, 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 he's doing so while holding a loaded AR-15 at the Zeminskis. Mr. Rosenbaum was going to chase him out of there to end the danger. And Mr. Richards boasts that, something along the lines, "You won't do shit, motherfucker." Well, Mr. Rosenbaum was wrong. Oh, that's an attaboy right there. Way to kill someone unarmed because you won't engage them. He raises the gun. He provokes the attack. He has to retreat. He has to exhaust all remedies before he regains the right to even use self-defense, not even to use deadly force. That's a whole other separate question. He does regain the right to self-defense if he exhausts all options. He does not. He could have ran a different way. He could have fought. He had all sorts of different ways to exhaust his options. He did not do it. As I said in the beginning of my closing, I don't think you even need provocation. An unarmed man chasing you.
At the beginning of my
shoot
closing.
him 4 times as he's falling. You kill him as he's falling in front of you.
Please stop.
Because you don't want to physically defend yourself.
Please
That's
stop.
first-degree reckless homicide right there. And Mr. Richards kind of plays games with the name reckless. Reckless means not intentional in this circumstance. And you can read the jury instructions. You can come to your own conclusions. And fire an AR-15 in any circumstance like this shows utter disregard for human life. There's no other explanation for it. If you're shooting an AR-15 at close range of people, you have no disregard for human life. That's not really in any dispute. I want to leave you with this. The meaning of reasonable doubt. I'm going to read portions of this instruction. Obviously, you'll have the whole instruction. The term reasonable doubt means a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It is a doubt for which a reason can be given. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt which is based on mere guesswork or speculation. That's what the defense is asking you to do, to guess what Mr. Rosenbaum was doing, to speculate what Mr. Rosenbaum was doing, to speculate and guess what Mr. Huber and this unidentified man were doing. We don't know because he killed 2 of them. All we can look at is the evidence and see him standing pretty much straight up or exactly straight up when he was shot in the hip and immobilized. A doubt which arises merely from sympathy or from fear to return a verdict of guilt is not a reasonable doubt. The defense's whole case has been trying to stoke sympathy for Mr. Rittenhouse and showing how everyone else was just a terrible person. Every life counts. Every life matters. If people did bad things that night, they could have been prosecuted. It's not up for Mr. Rittenhouse to be the judge, the jury, and eventually the executioner. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt such as may be used to escape the responsibility of a decision. There's a lot going on in this case. We all know that. We all knew that from the day we walked in on November 1st. But this verdict should be about what the facts are and what Mr. Rittenhouse did. That's what the 12 of you who go to deliberate will go and decide. You are the fact finders. You decide what is beyond a reasonable doubt. You decide what he is guilty or not guilty of from this menu of options that you now have. An imminent threat. The only imminent threat that night was Mr. Rittenhouse. He was not acting in legal, justified self-defense. He's guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kraus. Members of the jury, the time has now come when the great burden of reaching a just, fair, and conscientious decision in this case will be placed wholly with you jurors selected for this most important duty. You will not be swayed by sympathy, passion, prejudice, or political beliefs. You will disregard any impression which you may have regarding what you believe to be my opinions on the guilt or innocence of the defendant. You will disregard the claims or opinions of any other person or news media or social networking site. You will pay no heed to the opinions of anyone, even the President of the United States or the President before him. The founders of our country gave you and you alone the power and the duty to decide this case based solely on the evidence presented in this court. You will fearlessly keep faith with those who have entrusted to you the fair rendition of justice and the protection of our freedom. You will be very careful and deliberate in weighing the evidence. I charge you to keep your duties steadfastly in mind and as upright citizens to return just and true verdicts. You will decide only whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty of the offenses which are charged. Any consequences of your verdict are matters for me alone to decide and must not affect your deliberations.
There you go.
It will be for you to determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty as to each of the offenses charged or submitted. You must make a finding as to each count of the information. Each count charges a separate crime, and you must consider each one separately. Your verdict for the crime charged in one count must not affect your verdict on any other. This is a criminal and not a civil case, and therefore, before you can reach a verdict which may lawfully be received, it must be reached unanimously. In a criminal case, all 12 jurors must agree in order to arrive at a verdict. When you retire to the jury room, select one of your members to preside over your deliberations. That presiding juror's vote is not entitled to any greater weight than that of any other juror. We're going to stop at this point, and I'm going to ask that you return tomorrow. I'm going to let you take a vote. When you want to start tomorrow, you could choose 8, you can choose 8:30, you can choose 9. How many would be in favor of starting at 8:30? How many want to start at 9? I missed 8, didn't I? How many still want to start at 8? How many would like to start at 9? All right, that's the clear consensus. Well, it's not a consensus, but clear plurality, probably majority, I think. And so we'll start at 9 tomorrow, as we have been. The case is ready for decision by a jury of 12. We don't have that. And it's just as important as ever. I'd say more so, except that it was always important that you not discuss the case with anyone. And you won't have to resist that much longer now because you'll be able to decide the case. Please don't read, watch, or listen to any account of the trial or anything to do with the trial. And tomorrow morning we'll assemble, and as I indicated earlier, the tumbler over there will be used. All of your numbers will be placed in there, and 6 of the, well, assuming there are still 18 of you, 6 of them will be drawn out, and those persons will be held in reserve and will not join the 12 in deliberation. We're going to retain you here in the building. Those of you who are not selected will stay here in the building, and in the event that your services are needed as we continue the case. And then the 12 of you who are the jury selected will commence your deliberations at that point. So again, No talking about the case. Please don't read, watch, or listen to any account of the trial. Any questions, anybody? Enjoy the evening. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Well, and here we go. So, yeah, they still have 18 jurors. So I'm going to touch on that real quick so you guys know kind of what he's referring to. If you're not sure what he's talking about. So 18 jurors, and of those 18 jurors, they don't know who's going to be left with the verdict responsibility. So there's 12 people to be picked. They do it, they basically draw it out of a hat. You know, they draw their numbers. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. And then the last 12 are burdened with the responsibility with deciding if Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty or innocent.
Okay. Anything else? Your Honor. All right. See you tomorrow. Be here for the. Obviously, you're going to want to be here, and you better be. 9:00 tomorrow morning. I sent them to you electronically. Yeah, about 2:45, I think. If you don't get it, if you didn't get them, I had some trouble with your email yesterday, but I think I got it resolved. I hope I did. If not, let me know. Okay, great.
It's crank the tumbler and then pull a number. I-14, juror number I-14, the hospital. This chat has a right slant. Tacoma Fox. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I know my chat. I know what's up. Again, and I welcome all. I welcome all. 100% okay with that. So yeah, the interesting times right now, guys. We went through it. We did it, and I'm exhausted, and I'm just ready. I'm ready for a verdict. I'm ready for it to happen. There's a lot of talk, a lot of back and forth, a lot of replaying the same things that have been said pretty much for the last 2 weeks. But I want to tell everybody here, thank you so much for riding it out. Thank you so much for watching this court proceedings with me up to this point. Thank you for your input and for your contributions. I appreciate. I know we've had to break up a couple verbal matches, little boxing matches in here. But I think for the most part, everyone's done a phenomenal job. And now he did say that we will be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, I wanted to make sure that I get that right. So anyone that in the comments, feel free to post that up. I know he was talking 8 or 9, and then he threw 8:30 in there and skipped 8 completely. So, but we got a lot. We've covered a lot, rather. We've covered a lot in the last couple of weeks. And I feel like we've gotten to a point now where I think every single one of us is ready for this to just be over. We're ready for it to be done. Everyone here, 9 a.m. So 9 a.m. tomorrow, we'll be live again. Everybody's ready for it to be over. The city here is ready for it to be over. All of us at home, I think, that are connected to it. Nicolette, you're welcome. We're all ready for it to be over. Just put it behind us and move forward. And write it down, learn from it, don't forget it, educate ourselves as to how we can make sure it doesn't happen again, and make the changes, and then move forward and continue to move forward and organically drive ourselves in the direction of growth. So here in Kenosha, I can tell you that the temperature here and the overall sentiment is they're ready for it to be done. So I know that it can't happen any sooner. I know tomorrow, the jury, so you guys know, so the jury can take as long as it wants to deliberate. So tomorrow they'll go into court. I believe at that point they're going to go ahead and probably pick out of the hat who's going to be the lucky 12. And they might release them to a room, however that's going to work. And then 6 of them will be released into another room to watch, I don't know, real world reruns, something. I don't know, something to keep them out of the communication zone. And then the last 12, we're gonna have to go figure it out. And then that's what it's gonna come back. And I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. No matter what your views are, no matter your political leanings, no matter your philosophical attachment to this, it's now in the hands of our judicial system completely. Like the jury now is, as the judge said and waxed eloquent, it's up to them now to carry the weight and the burden therein. So I would hope that at this point we can all accept that whatever the verdict, whatever, no matter your feelings towards, against, or indifferent with Kyle Rittenhouse, that we can accept that that's what it is. Accept and move on. Remember, it's not you on trial. It's Kyle Rittenhouse. It's not your dad. It's I mean, unless you're Rittenhouse's family watching, it's not your son. So let us appreciate that it's time for us to just let this be what it needs to be, which is the conclusion to a case at the tail end of a terrible situation that tragically took 2 lives and almost a third. And let's move past it and grow from it. And I feel like we could all do that together. Penny Hafford, thank you so much for that. We're at a point now where we can let it go. And I think that's what we all came for. I know that's what I've been looking forward to, and I need to. And I'm looking, and I really am happy to know that I can finally just let this go. I didn't realize how connected I was and how much I needed to see this through until I started with the trial a couple weeks ago. And I've been stuck with it since. And I know a lot of you have. And I think this is important for me. I'm sure it's probably the same for you, to actually get done with this, to let us know that we can close the book on this and move on to something different. And it's going to be hard, but Stephanie Corley, yeah, it's time for healing. It's time to heal. And my heart goes out to the families of Anthony Huber, Joseph Rosenbaum. I truly do feel for your loss. Gage Grosskreutz, I'm elated that you survived, that you're alive, that you have the full function of your being. That's a blessing. It's beautiful and it's amazing. And when I first saw it, shortly thereafter, even in that, man, incredible. So what I would hope we get to right now is a point where we can appreciate that on a human level, we can work together now collectively and just appreciate that, we are, here's where we're at, here's where we're at, the jury's got to do it. No, the crowd out here, I don't know. We're going to go find out. But is violence acceptable? No. Do I accept it? No. Do I go out and try to do it? No. So, and you're welcome, man. And yeah, if you just tuned in, I appreciate that you missed a lot of time in the saddle here. Either way, I will be streaming, and I am here in Kenosha, and I do feel that I've heard everything you've said, and I'm out here. I'm out here for you. If there's anything I can do, I'll do it. And I hope that everyone out here knows that they can do the same. I was just a dude with a camera, man. Really, that's what it came down to. Just a guy with a camera, and everything's come from that in this case. Well, I would encourage everyone to feel empowered to do the same. If you want to be a part of it, even as an observer, you should feel safe enough to do that. And I would hope that, like I said, protests and demonstrations, they don't have to be violent. They can be very peaceful and educational. And that's where things change for me. Things change in a big way for me with the protests, especially back home, in a big way. And people are like, oh, cancel this, cancel that. Who canceled it? No, I stopped finding myself even wanting to be a part of it because it stopped being educational. In the beginning it was, and I was learning a lot. I was really learning a lot. And it stopped being about educating people into understanding why people were in the streets. And it got to a point where it was about intimidating people into just agreeing with the crowd. And that's unacceptable. I'm not with it. You can't force someone to agree with you in a moment and think they're going to stay with you with all that momentum. They're not going to. And all you've done is now made someone subconsciously your enemy because you forced them to do something they didn't want to do. And the human brain, the human, soul fights against that at a core level, knowing that they were forced to do something they didn't want to do. And then you got to deal with someone feeling bad about themselves because they're going to guess, second guess themselves moving forward. Like, why was I intimidated into following the crowd or the forces that be at the moment? You shouldn't be at that point. And so when it got to a point where it became about intimidation and not about education or understanding or being inclusive, everything became very, very exclusive. You're not with us, you're against us. You're not part of this, you're a part of that. And we've seen it. We've seen it out there time and time again, where people are, they're getting they're turning people against each other because we've decided that if you're not 100% on my team, if you don't agree with what I say wholeheartedly to the point of, chanting and reciting the words that I say, then you must be against me. People can't accept the difference, and it's that indifference that's the fuel that grows our country, is the agitated understanding that I don't agree with you, you don't agree with me, but that's okay. We don't have to agree with each other. We're going to find a way to get through this. And as they say, in every compromise and every truce or treaty that's successful, both parties need to leave unhappy, which means you both have to leave something on the table. You both have to make a concession in that. And you both have to be willing to walk away and know that you didn't get your way entirely, but you were willing to give enough to get a little in return. And that's a give and take of it all. That's a compromise. That's where we're at, A lot of demanding individuals out there that want things right now. They feel that they're entitled to things right now, that there's not work that needs to be done. There's not effort that needs to be put forth. There's people that haven't been out there, that haven't lived a lot of life. And I know I'm young. I'm 75 years young, just climbing through my youthful sprite nature of my being. But I don't feel like I've got it figured out. So I know that I don't demand things for the things that I've done, other than love from my friends and family. I can't even demand love from my dog. I try to give as much as possible to give it back, but you can't expect the world to give you what you want on your terms. It's just not how it works, man. It's not how it works. And so many people out there in the streets that in the world that we've seen for the last couple of years now, with a lot of the riots that have taken place and a lot of the protests, and it shifted away from trying to make a change to demanding that people change for them, for their idea, for their ideology. It's not how it works, man. That's not how it works. And it scares me that there's this thought out there that people can do that they can get away with it. And there's groups that operate underneath the banner where they say, hey, you're either with us or against us. You're going to do what we say, or we might get violent with you. That's the way it is. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. Not in the world that I want to live in. Not in the country that I want to live in. Not in the community. Not in the neighborhood. Not in the block. Not in the home that I want to live in. Will I allow that? Will I accept that? And we can do that. We can change it. We can change it. We can change it together. And it's a reach back is where we're at right now. It's a reach back situation. We need to reach back from where we're at and this fast-paced life that we live in our grown adult world, and realize that things move a lot slower for children. Their life isn't moving nearly as fast as ours, because we have so many things that we're trying to do, so many things we're trying to juggle, so many tasks on our to-do list. Like you saw the DA, like he's just sitting there checking off things he had to say. He wrote that all down, and he knew he had to get through it. That's our life right now. There's so many things we have to do, Byron. Thank you for that. Then we have to get through it. We have to. For kids, it's very simple, man. Wake up, find out how to put one leg in each pant leg, try not to fall down the steps, eat a bowl of cereal, and then, go to school, go to church, go to the playground. It's simple, but it's getting complicated. We're allowing it to become a lot more complicated than it needs to be. So we as grown, enlightened, educated, intelligent human beings, adults, have a responsibility to slow down and turn around and appreciate that there's children watching. There's young people that are looking for leadership. There's young people that want to understand, and they need to be taught. They need to be taught right. They need to be gifted with a true North Star, with good moral and value, and an ethic that'll take them in the direction of inclusive being. That's what we need. That's what our children need. That's what our future generations need. That's what these people, I think, are missing the point, that young people are going to do young people stuff, but we can help culture that in a way that it'll benefit the world and not use them as tools, as you've seen so many times out in these demonstrations and protests that turn to whatever they turn into. Not as soldiers. They don't need to be turned into soldiers, unless they want to go serve in the forces and become an actual soldier. But they don't need to be turned into street soldiers. We don't need to have them turned into in that gang mentality. But there's some brilliant minds that I've met. There's some incredible young people that I've met. There's some young minds that I've come across that have just blew me away, opened my eyes to things that I hadn't even seen before. And that's where I was in the awe-inspiring moment where I'm like, you're the future. The young people, they're our future. But we have to build a platform. We have to be able to do the work today so that they can have tomorrow what we may not have. And maybe that is the change. And like we said on Veterans Day, the quote that I was given as a child from my mother, and one that I believe is in the Forgotten Soldiers Memorial is, we gave our todays that you may have your tomorrows. It's a big deal. It's a big thought, but it's simple in practice, is to appreciate that ours might not be to reap the harvest, but maybe to plant the seeds. And that's okay. We may not get everything we want today, but in the effort to give someone tomorrow a better opportunity, there's the gift of your existence. And that's a beautiful opportunity that we have. And you can do it every day with the people's lives that you're around, with the lives you touch, with the children that you're around, with the family you share, with the friends that you keep. You have that opportunity. You can plant seeds every day. Make the change at home. Make the change in the way you think. Microprocess in a way that's going to get you to a more inclusive and I want to say healthier life. We need to detour ourselves from going into these microaggressions when we see people or think about people or hear from people or gather that somebody might have voted for somebody that you don't appreciate or might feel some sort of way about something that you feel strongly about that differs from that strong feeling. There's microaggressions that get played into that. But again, like I said before, that T-bar, the thoughts, beliefs, actions, reality, right? Those microaggressions, those are thoughts that we allow to become a belief system. And then we start acting a certain way and treating people a certain way. And that becomes the reality of the existence. So if we treat each other with a microaggression, the result and the reality is going to be aggression. And we've seen how that works out in the streets. We've seen how that plays out. People get hurt. People die. We can change. We can do better. So I'm going to leave you guys to it. We've had a long day. I'm going to go ahead and shake some hands and do my best to make some rounds. There's some people in town that I really am looking forward to seeing. And there's a people that are from town that I'm really looking forward to seeing. So stay tuned. Make sure to set up notifications on Facebook and YouTube. There's a good chance I'll be going live again tonight. What is it? 6 o'clock Central. We're at 4 o'clock Pacific and 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock Eastern time. So yeah, set up notifications and we'll be back in. For everyone that's contributed, for everyone that's become a part of the family, everyone that's been so amazing and supporting, I appreciate all of you. And we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep growing. So thanks for being here with me while we do it. I love you guys. Be grateful, be humble, love yourself, and love each other. We'll talk to you in just a little bit.